Remember to subscribe and share. Caroline Ferguson is a versatile Melbourne-based performer known for her work as a radio presenter, voiceover artist, and as an actress. In Darlin, it's the Jeanne Little Show. She brings the iconic TV personality Jeanne Little to life, capturing her zany humour and her vibrant spirit. Caroline Ferguson just happens to be my guest today. Caroline Ferguson, welcome to Noel Anderson's 15 Minutes of Fame.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you very much for having me.
Do you know, we talked about doing this podcast a very long time ago, almost 30 podcasts ago for me, and here we are on Melbourne Cup Day. So I've got to ask a question before we start, which is, are you a punter?
No, I couldn't even tell you the name of a horse that's running. All I know is that there's a lot of female jockeys. It's fantastic in this cup.
That's a pretty good place to start, because we're talking about, of course, a very, very famous female, perhaps the first female comedian on Australian television, which is, of course, Jeanne Little, who you are portraying. Did you know anything about Jeanne Little before
Yes.
you took the role? And what did you think of her at that point of time?
I can remember watching her on the Mike Walsh show when I was probably just before I was a teenager. So probably about 10, and I actually would chuck a sickie and wag school so I could watch the Mike Walsh show, because I was just agog at all of her fabulous costumes. And the show was just so much fun. There was Dr. John Wright. There was all the different characters, Chelsea Brown and all the guests they had. But I particularly loved Jeanne because she would come out with all these outrageous costumes, which of course were all made the night before out of astonishing things such as a real pizza for a beret. She made a lot of dresses out of food. She made a dress out of actual tip-top white bread toast that she stuck together the night before. And she was so spontaneous and hilarious. And also back in that day, Noel, what you've got to remember about the Mike Walsh show was that it was recorded live, so anything went, and there was no occupational health and safety. So all sorts of astonishing things went horribly wrong, yet it was hilarious.
I remember her very, very well. I mean, I think most older Australians anyway would remember her very, very well. You know, you were talking about her making dresses out of strange things. She may have been like the original Lady Gaga before Lady Gaga.
Yeah, she was. She was very, very resourceful. She grew up in a very poor background. Her mother had 7 children. The father shot through. So a lot of their clothes were made out of secondhand bits and pieces. And her mother was a great seamstress. And that's where Jeanne's love of fashion came, and her ability to make something out of nothing. I mean, she loved extravagant clothes. She was very influenced by the movie stars of the 30s and 40s, the golden era of Hollywood. You can tell by her pencil-thin sort of Greta Garbo eyebrows. And so she couldn't afford ostrich feathers when she went out at night. So she'd sort of get some fabric and scissors and go and sort of, you know how people make kitschy curly ribbons with dragging a scissor through them to get curly and all that sort of thing. So she even went to a dress-up party once as an alien, and she painted her teeth with silver nail polish and her lips stuck to her teeth, and she put a fishbowl on her head and made a dress out of tinfoil. So she really was out for outrageous costumes. She actually started on the Mike Walsh show purely by accident because she wanted to promote her maternity wear, because she thought, oh, it's so dowdy, sort of plain Jane suburban maternity wear. And she was so spontaneous and hilarious that they kept asking her back. She went on purely by accident because somebody dropped out. And Barry, who was well connected in the media scene of Sydney, they're all out to the pub in Paddington or Woollahra or wherever they were. And someone said, oh, my friend Mike Walsh has got a guest that's dropped out next week. And Barry said, put my wife on. She can talk the leg off a chair. She's hilarious. And the rest is history. It was purely by accident that she found her way to stardom.
And of course, she started on the Mike Walsh show on just $25 a week. One stage, she was the highest paid female on Australian television at $1,000 a week.
Wow.
I mean, that's very low comparison to what people earn today on TV. What I'm wondering, Caroline, how did this all come about? And I know you didn't write the play, so just tell us a little bit about how it all started, because you've been playing Jeanne for about 8 years now.
It started off, I met a writer by the name of Kieran Carroll. I went and saw one of his plays, and I really liked his writing, very very nostalgia-based, very, very Australian. And I said to him, would you like to write a play for me where I can sing and dance and do different accents? So I commissioned to do a play called Noel MacDonald, The Descent into Madness, which of course,
yes, I did. So we know one another from the classic that is Rel's Descent into Madness.
Descent into Pop Madness, I think it was.
Yes, it was.
And through that, Kieran and I decided that we'd like to continue working. So he said, let's think about something we can do. So he said, what about an Australian personality? And we thought about Nolene Brown. And then Kieran said, what about Jeanne Little? And I honestly, Noel, I nearly fell off my chair. I said, I love and adore Jeanne Little. She was just so refreshing, so outrageous, so funny, so distinctive, so Australian. Of course, her flamboyant, astonishing costumes. You know, I love a sequin and the feather and the frock. I'm sure I was a gay man in a past life, Noel. I just loved getting dressed up. And it just went from there. The plays had a lot of various incarnations. I don't know if it's almost like a cabaret show with a lot of singing and dancing. And it was a lot of froth and bubble and fun. And then once we did the show, Kieran did a rewrite. And then it took a little bit of a turn where it took on some serious themes.
Just thinking about Jeanne Little and how flamboyant she was, there was an element of drag to Jeannie, wasn't there?
Yes, very heavily influenced by the early drag shows in Sydney of the late 1960s. So she got a lot of her costumes and fashions.
And she also used to make a lot of clothes for drag queens in Sydney as well.
I didn't know that.
She did. Here's something you may not know. I've just done a little bit of research. So I'm going to show off a little bit here. Her husband, Barry Little, was gay. Did you know that? And he was in a relationship with a man.
Now you're giving away the show, Noel.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I didn't mean to do that.
It goes into how magnanimous and progressive Jeannie was. She was a very magnanimous, generous person and accepting, and the unusual relationship that they had. But they did have a genuine marriage as well and a genuine partnership.
Yeah, look, I think that's true. Yeah. I think that's true. Many years ago, Caroline, I actually went to Jeanne Little's house. We set up a theatre company and we're looking for some stars to put on the bill. And I went to Jeanne Little's house and I met Barry and I met Jeannie and she was as fabulous as you portray her. They didn't come on the bill of the show. I ended up putting Mark Lee on and his band. Remember Mark Lee from Gallipoli? He ended up headlining the show. So I do have a little bit of a connection to Jeannie. And I think she just looked at us and thought, who are these kids putting on this show at the Trade Union Club? I didn't know Barry had been gay, but I remember at the time thinking, that's an odd combination as a couple.
Yeah, well, they actually conceived two children, but one that was Katie was the daughter. So they did have a genuine marriage, and he was just astonished when he met her. He absolutely. So they had a wonderful partnership, and it goes into all of that. And also the play also explores when she became unwell with Alzheimer's.
I'm going to get onto that just a little bit later on. One of the questions I did wonder, why do you think someone like Jeanne Little, who, as I mentioned earlier, had almost a drag persona, was so loved by so many Australians? And she was loved here. Very,
very loved. I think it was she was just so genuine. She truly, truly loved people and very generous as a performer. She was on stage with Bob Hawke. She was, I think, very relatable too. She was very much during that time in Australia of women were starting to. She was like a bellwether in the women's movement in Australia, because you've got to remember she was around the same time as Germaine Greer came out with Female Eunuch. Uta Buttrose took up the helm of the Women's Weekly, became an editor. So she was in that sort of Helen Reddy period of women really coming to the fore of the media landscape. And she was one of the first comedians. I don't think she intended to be a comedian. I don't think she said, I'm going to write some great gags and be a comedian. It just happened naturally because she was naturally hilarious. You also got to remember that a lot of the Mike Walsh show was improvised. And she just had to make do with what was going on. A lot of people also don't realise that she was actually, and she discovered that she could really sing. She had a great mezzo soprano voice. She did a tribute show to Marlene Dietrich, which she took to San Francisco. And
Jerry's Girls as well,
yeah,
Caroline.
yeah, so the Jerry's Girls, great, strong singing voice, and that sort of Auntie Mame, sort of Ethel Merman kind of style singing. She did a very successful tribute show to Marilyn Monroe. So she was a bit of an all-rounder. She could bust a Bob Fosse move. She was just so much fun and up for everything. Sometimes when I watch some of the clips of her and Mike Walsh, he's almost treating her like, oh, you know, silly Jeannie, or, you know, but she was actually very smart, great natural comedic timing.
Which, of course, you have, Caroline, as well. You've got terrific comedic timing. I'm wondering, inside of you, where do you most connect with her as a woman?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question. I think her love of people. My husband actually says, I make friends with everybody in the Telegraph poll. So did Jeannie. I love people. I like talking to people. And of course, I'm a bit of a clown. And I think Jeannie was a bit of a natural clown too. But, you know, happy to be funny, happy to sort of just have fun and the ability to be a little bit silly sometimes. You've
always been very good at being a little bit silly. So I know that from working with you. And I've got to say, I have a few really good memories of working with you and unusual memories I didn't think were going to be terrific memories, which was when we were doing Narelle McDonald. We actually rehearsed at all these rock and roll venues all over Melbourne. And at the time I was like, why are we doing it in all these rock and roll venues? But now when I think back on those memories of working together, they were fun times. And the venues really added a level of fun to the rehearsals because we just didn't know what the venue was going to look like when we arrived to actually do the rehearsal. So I really appreciate our relationship at that point of time for those wonderful memories of those crazy band rehearsal spaces that we worked in.
Yeah, a lot of sweat and cocaine, heroin, and what else?
Which of course we weren't taking at the time.
No, that. No. And of course, you're rather a bit of a fan of a few props and sparkles and glitter too.
Well, I definitely am a fan of a few props and sparkles, which brings me up to another point. Is there any glitter in the show? Do we have any of Jeannie's fantastic frocks that she wore?
Well, because it's only me on stage and I have performed in very small places like the Butterfly Club, I can't really do a dress change, but there's a lot of headwear because she made astonishing hats and turbans and headpieces. So I have a fabulous costume maker, Tracy Hogan. She used to teach fashion illustration at Polytechnic and in Collingwood and everything. And she's a wonderful seamstress. So I have some great costumes, including a beautiful cocky turban, which complete with cockies on my head and cocky poo running down the back of my head. And minties on the side look like hair curlers. A bit of Marlene Dietrich action happening, and there is a garbage bag cape. And what else have I got in there? And of course she did wear, because she was a huge fan of the golden era of Hollywood, a lot of Carole Lombard and all those. I've got a beautiful platinum blonde Marilyn wig that I wear.
I saw the play a few years ago. Now I can't remember how long exactly it was. And there is a serious side to the play which we haven't spoken about. You've kind of hinted at earlier on. And that is, of course, that Jeannie got Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, she did. Like a lot of people, a lot of families, you don't really realise it until it starts to get a bit late. It began during the Marilyn Monroe shows where she started missing lines, but she completely had no idea. She also travelled a bit by herself to do some appearances and got lost. And Katie Little told me she found some of Jeannie's little evening handbags, and inside the handbag were a lot of little notes with people's names. And she'd say, Cheryl with the red curly hair, or she was to realise that she was starting to become unwell. But a lot of people don't realise it. And your families are in denial. We've all got ageing parents now. You don't know what's just sort of starting to what's decline and what's actually Alzheimer's, which is a disease.
Caroline, they kind of covered this up, didn't they, the family too? Not covered it up, they just didn't let people know. Because of her image of being so much fun, they didn't let people know that how sick she was, did they, the family? They kept it from the public for a very, very long time.
So Jeannie went to live with Katie and her husband, and that became very, very difficult. Also, Barry's health started to decline at this point too. So Katie was very, very stressed out. So eventually Jeannie was put into a home where she was cared for when she could no longer recognise people. It's probably the most tragic thing. And by that stage, it's more the family and loved ones that suffer more because they've lost that person. The person's still there, but they've occasionally she came back a little bit and would say, "Oh, Tom," and would remember the grandchildren. She loved her grandchildren. She absolutely filled them up with Tim Tams and chocolates and ice creams and Freddo frogs and ran her ragged. It's a very relatable show too it's about family, and also it's so Australian, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people. The writing is very sensitive and respectful. I found that because she had the astonishing voice, I found it very difficult, Noel, to do her voice without sounding like I was making fun of her. You know, it was a fine line not to make her too cartoonish.
What was her saying? "Darling, are you paying attention?" That was kind of it, wasn't it?
A lot of the reason why she had these long stretched out vowels is that a child, she had a chronic stutter. So she found by dragging out her words, it helped the words come out of her mouth. Like a lot of singers people who sing often had stutters, and by singing, they sort of sing the words, which help the words come out of their mouths, like pulling a ribbon out of your mouth.
Going back to the play again, just from my memories of the play, the bits that about dementia and Alzheimer's disease were for me the most moving part of the play, and I really loved that part of it because I guess there, like a lot of Australians, there was such love for her as a personality, and I really was very moved at the end of the piece. How do you prepare to play the ending? And did you do any research, or do you know anyone who has got dementia?
Yes. A couple of friends of my girlfriend's fathers had dementia, but no women. I watched a documentary of Hayley Mills' parents. John Mills' wife had dementia, and I remember watching a documentary where she just didn't recognise anybody, and then he plonked her onto the piano and they just bashed out, and then she suddenly came back and smiled at him, and he said, "Oh, there you are." And also with Kieran's writing, Noel, the play, the way it travels and the journey, it's easy to go down into that because she starts talking about how they found out, and then the way it's written, it's an easy descent for me to go down to that point.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm doing the play, it's interesting. You know, when you're on stage, you have a dual dialogue. You're doing the lines, but there's all a part of your brain about what's going on in the audience. Is that person looking at their phone? Or, you know, that kind of thing that's going on in your head. And it's very interesting when the play flips. I'm watching people and they're like, because it's all fun and froth and bubble and, you know, silliness. And then they're like, you see people going, and they laugh at something and they go, "Oh, what did I was meant to laugh? Is that all?" You know, it's interesting how Karen's written it. There's a few dramatic surprises where things tilt.
What do you think Jeannie would make of the play if she was to walk into a performance and sit down a couple of rows from you? What do you think she would be saying to herself?
Well, I hope that she'd be happy with the costumes. I think from what I know of her, having unfortunately never met her, but you have, I think she'd be going, "Oh, good on you, darling, aren't you fun and gorgeous?" I think that's what I think that she would enjoy it. I'm sure there'd be bits where like, "Oh, that's not quite right," or, you know, "I wouldn't have worn that," or something. Knowing her, I think she was just such a generous person that she'd probably just really genuinely love it and feel very flattered and honoured. And
I think she was a very open person, and I think she would be very proud of how respectful you are about her illness and how moving and educational I think the last part of the play is about Alzheimer's disease in particular, you know. I mean, I hope none of us, you know, between you and I, anyone that I know has to go down that road.
Same. I hope so. I hope that it brings a bit more awareness, and also maybe it gives people a bit more of an understanding of Alzheimer's. And I mean, Barry was astonishing. He wrote her show. He was her manager as well.
Yeah, he was her manager.
And he wrote a lot of the shows. He's a very clever fellow. And how much he loved her too, you know. And also, you know, she can be very frustrating to be around. There's one little bit in the play where she sprints up to Oxford Street in Paddington just to grab some, you know, Boston bun and a litre of milk. And she comes back about 5 hours later because she just stops and talks to everybody. She's so generous with everybody. She gives gas. And at the end of some show, the matinee somewhere in Gosford, they've got to get on a plane and go somewhere. And she'd just be hanging around, indulging everybody, talking to them all night. He's going, "Come on, we've got to go. We've got another show tomorrow. You know, we better get a wriggle on."
You know, in many ways, I think she was the original party girl. she was a party girl before Barry met her and they married, you know. I'm just to wrap up, I'm wondering what kind of legacy do you think Jeanne Little has left behind all these years later?
Well, as I said before, I think she was a really sort of a groundbreaking person in showbiz for women. You know, she really became probably the star of the Mike Walsh show without even trying. What's hilarious is she never tried to do anything. She was not ambitious. She just wanted to make beautiful clothes through pure chance that somebody dropped out, that she fell onto television purely by accident. And the fact that she was just so incredibly fun and such a good sport. And then also, you can do anything. I mean, you can just set your mind to anything and you can do it. You can, be a great performer if you want to, and really just by being a really genuinely sort of good person and being fun and spontaneous and not taking yourself too seriously.
Caroline, that sounds almost exactly like you as a person, I think.
Oh.
You and Jeanne, absolutely identical. In my eyes, I think you've both got a lovely, inviting personality that everybody loves. And this is going to be your moment where you can wrap up and sell the show. So let's do it.
Okay. If you just happen to be out west near Geelong, there's a show at Birregurra. It's the Birregurra Town Hall. That's on the 16th of November at 3:00 in the afternoon. So you can be home for tea by 6. That's a lovely little venue. You can book through Try Booking. There's 2 shows at the Butterfly Club in Carson Place off Little Collins Street in the CBD. They are at 7 p.m. on the 22nd and the 23rd of October. You can just go onto the Butterfly Club website for that. And there's one final show at Shirley Burke Theatre, which is a part of Kingston's Arts Council, and that's in Parkdale. That's on Sunday, the 24th, and that's at 2 p.m. And you can just go on to Kingston Arts Council. It's called Darling, It's the Jeanne Little Show. And I'd love to see you, and I'll have a glass of bubbles with you after the show and a chit-chat.
Caroline Ferguson, I've only got one thing left to say to you. Do you know what that is?
Thank you, darling.
No, are you paying attention? No.
Oh, yes.
I've got to say to you, Caroline Ferguson, this has been your 15 Minutes of Fame.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Noel.
If you enjoyed this podcast, Noel Anderson's 15 Minutes of Fame, remember to subscribe and share.